Hello. Today I'm going to tie for you an October Caddis Pupa, but first I'm going to go on camera and talk about fall fly fishing for just a bit. Hello, I'm Kevin Sieja, and I've been doing fly tying videos for a couple of years now, I think, but I haven't really appeared on camera. Why? Because who wants to see me? You want to see the bugs that I make. But today I want to talk about fall fly fishing, and I am going to tie a fly, but I think this requires some discussion before we actually get started. So I've been an avid year-round fly fisher for a while now, and I'm also an avid fly tyer. So I'm always looking for that ultimate, what's the next pattern I need, or what's the ultimate collection of trout flies that I can put together and guarantee success in the fall, or for any time of year for that matter, but we're talking fall today. So other than the October caddis and maybe some random blue-winged olive hatches, there's not a lot going on in the fall, but trout do feed. They do pack on the feed bag, and they're trying to stock up on some extra food for winter. So they aren't as, I don't know that they key on actual hatches. What they do is they look at everything as if it's food, and by this time they have a lot of experience. So they've seen almost everything that floats by. They've sampled it, they've tasted it, and they know what they like. I don't think they're educated in the sense that they have long memories, but they do instinctively know what's food and how it should be presented. I think it's more, fall fly fishing is more about the presentation than about the actual fly. So that said, there are some patterns that seem to work better in the fall, and we'll talk about those. But fall fly fishing is all about conditions. Is it low and clear? Did we get recent rains? Is the water up? Maybe a little off color? But that'll affect both what flies we use and how we present them. Now, another thing to talk about probably is the mixture of trout in the streams, right? So there are some fall stockings in Pennsylvania. Stockies tend to be voracious feeders. They're competing against a whole bunch of their buddies that got put in at the same time. They're seeing new and different food sources. So you can have one of those double-digit fish days pretty easily. But when it's low and clear, even the stockies get lockjaw, and they're looking for maybe small bugs, maybe something presented perfectly. So, and certainly the trout that have been in there a few months, they're pretty well acclimated by now. The stream-bred trout are probably the best at adapting and being very picky. So these fish kind of require not necessarily the perfect fly, because I'll be honest, I've caught them on hatches that have ended in April. But if you float one of those Cahills or something, maybe they hatch in the fall too. But I know they hatch in the spring. A lot of these hatches that take place in April, I've used the same patterns and put them in front of trout without spooking them, and caught a few fish. So especially again when the water is low and clear. So I think it's often about how we present. So in the fall when it's low and clear, bobbers, floats are not your friends. A lot of weight is probably not your friend. Things that go plunk on the water tend to spook or alert trout to our presence. So we have to be careful. And just recently, I put probably some of the biggest hopper imitations that I've ever tied. I made them for bass fishing in the lake, but I used them in a hopper dropper rig and caught a few fish that way. And believe me, the water was very low and clear. We were on the Potomac last weekend, and the water was about as low and clear as you're going to find it. And those were stocked fish. They stock them regularly, but they were already wise to anglers walking by and and trying to fool them. So I used this giant hopper and a sunken ant pattern. So ants, they recognize those as food, and I caught a few fish that way. I also caught a couple on that giant hopper too as well, where not necessarily got them into the net, but they took the giant hopper. So that's an option. Don't rule out hopper, dropper, but using a dry fly as your dropper. That big hopper was easy to watch. The dry fly was a little harder to see, especially when it got out there a little ways. But I put a little, and this is another fly that hatches in the spring, right? It was a little sulfur dry fly, mostly because I thought I wanted to see it at first. So I had it out. I put it on below the hopper. And as it floated along, I had probably about 50-50 takes versus refusals, but I did fool a couple of fish with that thing too. So this is all about presentation, I think, this time of year. Keep that in mind. And with that said, we're going to do that tying video. So let's go and tie a fall pattern, and we'll talk more during that tying session.
So here's the fly we're going to tie today. It's an October Caddis Pupa, and we'll talk a little more as we go. But we're going to do this on a size 10 caddis hook, that long curved bend. I'm going to use bootlaces, the darker strand of the bootlace for the shell. And here's a mixture of some orange and some tan Haretron dubbing. And I'm going to rib it with medium wire and use a partridge feather, this darker brown barred partridge feather for the legs. And we'll hold it all together with some 8/0 Uni Thread. And you'll see we darken that later because I didn't actually have a dark brown version, so I had to darken the tan. But let's get a hook in the vise and we'll get started. So here I want to catch just the deep part of the bend and kind of keep it level. It's a curved hook, so you don't want it too low or too high. I want to be able to get to the bottom. Sometimes I have to shift it while I'm tying, but we're going to get the thread started, leave a little space behind the eye. That'll remind me not to crowd the hook, and it gives me a nice thin area to tie in the legs. So snip off the excess and push that little stub around and wrap toward the back. When I get back near the point, I want to add in the copper wire. This is some medium wire, a little thicker. This is a little bigger fly. Typically I use small or extra small for almost everything, but this one seemed appropriate given everything else, the proportions and size of this fly. So get that wire wrapped in, let it go to the far side of the hook because I want to come across the bottom with that first wrap. And I'll go back up in front of the point. So here's that shoelace. It's kind of separated. I'll grab that darker section. It's kind of a reddish brown. And like I said, these colors actually make a pretty good sulfur pattern. I've done a couple of flies that way if you check out my other videos. And I'll get that tied in and wrapped back to the end of the body there where we stopped with the copper wire. And we'll wrap those butt section down there a little bit. And it's going to be covered with a bunch of dubbing, so not real worried about the stray fibers. So this was just a finger mix. I had some darker orange and some tan Haretron. I think it was Haretron. And I mixed the two. There's even some stray black fibers in there. I think they're guard hairs. This is kind of a good mixture. It's going to darken up when it gets wet, but a good mixture for an October caddis. Like I said in the early part of this video, though, I don't know if we're actually trying to match the caddis here or not. The fish at this point, everything looks like food to them. They've seen a bunch of things that look like food to them. They know what to eat and what not to eat by now, and I think this is more about what fly can we do and put in front of them that it's presented naturally. So in one point I want to make here, so I'm doing this on a size 10. It's easier to do it nice and big, and in the video you can see everything as we go. But to be honest, in the fall with the low clear water that we've been fishing in, I think something about a size 14 or 16 is more useful than this big one. But you never know. I was in Spring Creek a couple of weeks ago and tied on a big bug that was weighted and used it for weight to pull down the smaller nymphs that I really thought would attract fish. And the couple of fish that I did catch that day ate the big bug. So here we are with the body's about done, and I'm going to pull the fibers in. I want to get these to kind of spread out a little bit so they appear to be like a shellback. And there's some kind of poly. We talked about these bootlaces before, but you could substitute here if you want to use poly or some other kind of shellback. Feel free, change the colors and do whatever you think you need to do to match things in your stream. I have the shellback pulled over and tied down. I'm going to put a whip in here so that things don't fall apart. I'm going to use the rotary feature to put the copper rib on, and the rib's is also going to pin down that bootlace that's stretched over the back there. So first wrap one underneath. We're going to try and space things out, do a little twisting here. And one little trick is to only pull tight on the copper once everything's in place, and like I wrap over the top kind of soft. It depends. Sometimes I want to use some of that wrap over the top to pull those fibers back up on top, and then other times you don't want them to move because they are aligned. So you can play with the tension on the copper wire, and that'll help get things where they need to be. So that was about 4 or 5 turns. We're up near the front. I'm going to put my bobbin holder, the bobbin cradle, just right in the way so you can see it in the background. I think I've paid more attention to that before and had it pulled out of the way so you have a better background. But we got a few wraps on the copper. I'll use the thread, a little bit of tension to kind of hold that from shaking around as I twist the wire off. And the abdomen looks pretty good. So we're going to tie in some legs. This is one of those Partridge feathers. And it's got the brown bar, that reddish brown bar that is kind of an October caddis color as well. I snipped out the center, and I'll strip away what I don't need down at the bottom. This feather's on the larger side, so right about where I snipped it, if I get that to land right behind the eye, that'll give me legs that are the right length for this fly. Yeah, I'll push that underneath, get a couple of wraps on it, and pull it through. And right about there, it falls off the stem, and that should be about right. And I'll wrap back over it. And pull up the butt end of that feather and snip off the waist. And I'm going to work my way back to a starting point for where I want the thorax of this bug, I guess we'll call it. I'm going to double that strand of bootlace in. I'm going to double it over. I'm going to double it over and tie it in. And here again, I'm going to pay a little attention to trying to spread it out evenly across the top so it looks more like a shell. There, kind of slid and flattened out a little bit, and I think we'll be able to work with it. And we'll snip off the excess. So here's something I didn't show, so I'm kind of dragging it behind now. I'm going to use some hare's ear dubbing for the thorax. It darkens up real nice in the water. It's kind of spiky, but basically that's just trimmed off. That's the box that came from a hare's ear like selection, but this I've refilled it a couple of times. The hare's ear that I'm using here is just uh, shaved off of parts of a mask, an old rabbit mask that I was using. And we'll put that on. We're not trying to make it real tight. We want it to be kind of shaggy and um, hang out and look like parts of bugs during the hatching process. And this is kind of a pupa slash emerger, or getting ready to emerge. Um, you want it to look, the parts of the shell are coming loose, legs are going everywhere. These guys, and hopefully it looks a little more interesting that way to the fish. So we'll twist and get a few wraps on there and kind of pull loose the excess. I'm going to grab a brush and brush that down, get all the stray fibers and everything pointed toward the bottom. And make sure to leave enough room behind the eye here because you have to pull that shell over and tie it down. You also need a little room to change the direction of those legs. You can't just wrap in the same place and change the direction of a fiber, so we'll need a little space there to wrap back over. So pay careful attention. We'll get that first couple of wraps around that those fibers that we pulled over for a shell and snip off the excess. There's a long one there that I missed that I fight with a little bit, but we'll clean him up later. So here you can see that partridge feather got pulled to one side. Now there I bumped the vise. Apologize for that. Or I'm sorry, I bumped the camera. I apologize for that. So I kind of had to reset things and come back, but picked up where we left off. So we're going to push those partridge fibers back and just kind of tug them around. And I take a little extra care and a couple extra wraps here to get them where I want them. It's probably not as hard as I made it look. We still have that long poly fiber in there, I can see. It's easier to see on camera. I didn't see it so much when I was doing the actual tying. And there's a couple more legs there that we can drag back and rather than snip them off. There, we finally got that poly fiber out of the way. And I'll snip out anything that's facing forward or around the eye, clean up a little bit. It's not perfect, but that's a big eye on this hook. I'll be able to shove almost any kind of leader or tippet material through there. So, and here's the point I made before. So this thread's a little light. Kind of used up my darker 8/0, and I'll just hit it with the marker, darken things up, and end result's the same. So my whip finish here wasn't exactly counting as I was tying, but I took a couple of extra wraps just to get the shape that I wanted. And that's pretty much it. The rest is a little head cement, Sally Hansen's hard as nails. It'll soak into that bootlace that's across the thorax. I didn't coat the whole thing. The water will darken the other part, but I didn't want to risk. You coat the whole thing and then it ends up soaking down into the dubbing, and I don't know, it kind of looks too much like a manufactured fly or something firm, and so we'll just concentrate on the thorax and the shell that's up over the thorax of this one. So get a nice even coat on it. Looks like a lot, but it'll soak in. And push a little bit around the bottom, and that's pretty much it. So like I said, this is probably something that imitates the October Caddis Pupa. Um, Pay attention to the water conditions. In high or dirty water, this one may work well. In the low clear water that I've been fishing in, this one's way too big. But then there are those days where something eats it anyways. So hope this helps you out. I hope the little hints about my experiences with fall fly fishing that we did at the beginning and throughout help you out as well. And thanks for hanging in there. If you want to learn more about me, look me up on Amazon. And until next time, be safe.